Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is FPC Radio Live. It is April the 20th. Happy holidays to all my stoner friends out there. I know everyone's out there celebrating. Or at least, John, I don't know what it was like in your day when you were younger, a tad bit younger, but today was a pretty big holiday in college. For others, not me, of course. I just said no to, what was that slogan? Oh, just say no to drugs. DARE. You ever had to take that program? Was that around when you were a kid?
It was actually, yeah. And I always hated the smell of marijuana, still do, but now obviously it's advanced to the point where there's no smell, there's vaping and all that stuff. So I support it if it is used properly and it's used in the medical industry. So more power to the entire process. But yeah, back in my day, I grew up in the 80s. So by the time we got to college, cocaine had pretty much taken over.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Society at that point, yeah, late 70s into the 80s. I've never done either. I've never smoked a cigarette. I just was all in on drinking to the point where I was a championship beer drinker for about 10 years, and then I stopped in 1992 and haven't had any since. But yeah, the other stuff never really interested me. I remember like in seventh grade riding on the bus and smelling it, and the first time I smelled it, I'm like, what the hell is that? It smelled like burnt celery. And from that point forward, I never really was impressed with it. Thankfully, never got into it because I know it increases your appetite. I don't need that. I'm good with that already.
Well, there are obviously some benefits to it, and the I guess the stigma that it carried for such a long time was way overblown because, well, we all know the campaign on the war on drugs and how marijuana is a gateway drug or whatever, all this stuff. But the way I feel about it and the way I feel about just about anything is to each his own. If you're free to, or at least in my opinion, you're free to ingest and do whatever you want. You know what I mean? Like I guess I'm very libertarian when it comes to that. Like I feel like, hey, as long as you're not hurting anyone, if you're going to do that in the privacy of your own home, by all means, knock yourself out. You understand the risks that are involved with doing anything like that. And as long as you're not harming anyone else, I couldn't care less. So, but that's a discussion for another show, for another day, for another completely different audience, because that's more of a political roundtable type discussion. But no, obviously there is a lot of humor or fun that surrounds 420 just because of the whole mentality of it. And it is kind of like a joke. All the dispensaries are going to have sales and all that stuff. And it's just, like I said, when I was in college, and this is now becoming a long time ago, I hate to admit it, but it was obviously a much bigger deal and something that became more of a holiday, something to break up the monotony of college life. But anyways, that's today, and that's the rest of the day. So if you are going to celebrate, be safe, don't drive, and for the love of God, make sure you have snacks. Okay, you can't have too little snacks. You got to have more. Just always say you got to have more. You got to have more. So, and may I recommend, by the way, John, one of my favorite snacks for state of mind, Tostitos chips. Whatever flavor whatever kind you like, whether it's the scoops, whether it's the lime tasting ones, those are very good, by the way. And jalapeno cheddar dipping sauce from Frito-Lay's or Fritos, whatever. I'm just going to call it Fritos because I'm kind of screwing that whole thing up. Very good. Impossible to put down.
Yeah, I mean that does sound really, really good. I'm kind of a traditional potato chip guy, like the basic potato chips, nothing too fancy. I know this is going to probably turn everybody off, but I'm a healthy snack guy. Carrot sticks, petite carrots, grapes, pineapple. I like fruit and vegetables. I do, but I eat a lot of it, so maybe that's a little bit too much. But yeah, chips. I'm a chips guy all the way.
Well, I'm kind of the same way. Like I do enjoy my fruits, my vegetables, kind of the healthier snacks, but I got a few weak spots, and that's one of them. There's a few types of candies that I can't resist. And I do go through chip kicks where it's, I don't know. I crave that saltiness, I guess. Which again, and my favorite type of chips are salt and vinegar, which it's bad for me for so many different reasons. But sometimes I just can't put them down. A good kettle cooked salt and vinegar chip. Oh, I'm good. I could eat a whole bag right now. So, but
you know what I do for salt is I eat olives. I'm a huge olive person. You can put a barrel of olives in front of me, and I'd finish them off. I love it. Well, it's must be the Italian in me, right?
I think I just threw up in my mouth. Sorry, might be too much. Oh my god, I can't stand olives.
Really?
Well, man. I can't say this would drastically change my opinion of olives if I hadn't experienced this, but years of working in pizza shops, especially my early days at Domino's, way back in the day, opening up the giant industrial can of olives and dealing with the liquids and the smells turned me off from olives forever. I can't. No, I don't think I would have liked them anyways because it's really not my thing. But yeah, that's one of my bad experiences that has impacted my adult life.
Right, we agree to disagree.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, it's if we're going to talk olives, we're never going to come to an agreement here. So, anyways, let's get back to the topic at hand, and that is sports. By the way, pretty interesting night last night. Both NBA, NFL, or I'm sorry, NHL, but also kind of, again, the angst getting closer to the draft and the fact that Aaron Rodgers says you have to be traded. And now, there's, I don't want to say rumors because they're more just like thought processes that are coming across the minds of others that speak on the league, but they're wondering if maybe this might not get done at the end of the day, and that would be something that would really be fascinating. But we're not going to start there. We're going to start in the NBA because a couple things happened, John. First off, your Lakers, sorry, they couldn't take a 2-0 lead. It happens. They lost. But more importantly, the Milwaukee Bucks dominated the Heat without Giannis. I did not see that coming.
No, I didn't see them hitting 25 or 49 from three. That's over 50%. Milwaukee's very streaky when it comes to three-point shooting, like in the NBA. And I believe they were 11-8 this year without Giannis. Obviously, I believe he's the best player in the league, should be the MVP, but he's not going to be. It's going to be Joel Embiid instead. But, give Milwaukee a lot of credit, whether it's Middleton or Holiday, the rest of that group, Bobby Porter Jr., they stepped up. I mean, they've got championship DNA. They won the title 2 years ago. They sensed that last night was a must-win game. It's close to being a must-win without being an elimination game. Because if you get down 2-0 and now you're going on the road for 2 and you don't know what the situation is with Giannis, that would be a massive comeback to come from behind. But again, they are right now, along with the Celtics, probably the co-favorites to win the championship. That was a big win. They can get a couple extra days for Giannis to rest up and try to get closer to 100% with that bruised tailbone, then I think they'll be okay in that series. But that was a huge win, and hitting better than 50% from three was the biggest reason why they were able to do that.
Yeah, and look, I didn't think it was impossible for them to win. But at one point they're up nearly 30 points. And I was kind of paying attention to it in the background because of the Bruins game on last night, which in hindsight maybe I could have just skipped over that one, but. Yeah, so I'm sitting here looking like, how is it that they're up almost 30 points and have no Giannis? Like, obviously you need a great shooting night like they had. You need a guy like Chris Middleton to step up, and he did. So the timing of the streakiness was certainly beneficial for Milwaukee. And look, I mean, you're down 2. It's not the end of the world. It really isn't. Now you have to go and win a couple games on the road, and that complicates things a little bit, certainly with a team like Miami who, maybe they start feeling themselves if they go up 2-0, and, maybe that's a little bit tough to overcome. But all of a sudden you win this game, big win. I mean, you kind of stop that bleeding a little bit. I would assume Giannis is going to be healthy and ready to go for game 3. So all of a sudden now it's a brand new series, and you're not trying to dig yourself out of a hole. You're trying to get a stranglehold on this, because I think if they go up 2-1, especially after winning Giannis, I think psychologically, I think they take a stranglehold on this series.
Yeah, without question, because then they would be in a position to get up 3-1 and then wrap it up back home for Game 5. So, in these series, Game 3 is always a critical game. I believe it's about 75% of the teams that win Game 3 when it's tied 1-1 go on to win the series. Oftentimes, they're just a better team. So, they take control of the series in that situation. But, if you go up 2-1, now you only have to win 2 of 4. If you get down 2-1, you have to win 3 of 4. And that's a tough task, especially when with Giannis coming back, Milwaukee does have the better team. So, yeah, Game 3, obviously, got to monitor how Giannis is. That's an injury. Maybe it's not just pain management, but how stiff you are.
Yeah.
How much can you move? And his game is built on that. So you're going to have to see how he recovers from that.
Well, we talked about this the other day. I mean, it's a matter of, well, you don't get much during the playoffs. You really have to sweep an opponent and eventually, eventually hope that your future opponent takes 6 or 7 games. That's the only time you really get any real rest because of the overlap and then the delay between the start of the series. And that's about it. So, look, I mean, getting this extra day of rest for Giannis is a good thing. Certainly, considering the fact that they won the game, it makes the decision to have him sit look a whole hell of a lot better, and then you're pretty fortunate in that sense. But long term, you need a healthy Giannis. You're not going to win an NBA title with him. You may win a couple games here and there. You're not going to win 16, and that's the big thing for Milwaukee because they don't want to just get to the second round. They don't want to just go and win another title, and you're not doing that without a healthy Giannis.
Yeah, absolutely. Philadelphia is not going to win the title without a healthy Joel Embiid. Not win the title unless Jason Tatum is playing. Although of the 3 contenders in the East, they're probably best equipped to move on without their best player because I think Jaylen Brown is better than the second best player on Philadelphia.
And they're just deeper too.
Milwaukee, and they are deeper, absolutely. So if there's any team in the East that could survive the loss of its premier player, it's the Celtics because there have been times in the postseason, including last year's finals, where Jaylen Brown was better than Joe. Obviously, Milwaukee relies so heavily on Giannis, both ends of the floor. He's an elite defender as well, but give them a lot of credit for pulling through last night and putting together a great effort.
Yeah, and speaking of the Celtics, they looked good the other night. I mean, they're doing what they're supposed to do against an Atlanta Hawks team that just, seems like it's a little bit too big of a stage for them. I mean, the turnovers were, that they played very sloppy, and the Celtics took advantage of that.
Yeah, just better. It's a bad matchup for Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
Atlanta's so guard-driven, and the Celtics can defend guards. And you got Marcus Smart and Derek White, who's actually been the Celtics' best player in this series. You got Malcolm Brogdon coming off the bench, can give you 20 points any given night. The Celtics match up really well against Atlanta. I mean, they've been in control of both of these games. Took the foot off the gas a little bit late in those games. So back-to-back 13-point wins that felt more like 25-point wins. You want to just get this thing over with, sweep Atlanta, get Jaylen Brown some rest for that sliced hand that he's dealing with, and then you wait to see when you start things up against Philadelphia, who's also up 2 games to none. It looks like it's a course between the Celtics and Philadelphia in round 2.
Which again, I mean, that's what you would expect, especially in the NBA. Mm-hmm. A lot of these things tend to work out as they're expected, certainly in the early rounds, because of just the talent disparity for the most part. So, before and I'm like I said, I'm going to bring up hockey too because it was fascinating. Another fascinating night last night in the playoffs. I love the Stanley Cup playoffs, but the Oakland Athletics have apparently been granted, or what's the headline here? They're basically one step closer, which again isn't surprising. The Raiders have already beat them to the punch, moving from Oakland to Las Vegas. And the reality of it is as soon as sports betting became legal and accepted, which again was just a matter of had nothing to do morality wise. I mean, this idea that the NFL was above gambling ever or anything like that. It's ludicrous. They didn't have a piece of the pie, and of course the legalities of it, federally at least, prevented them from kind of going all in. But now they are all in, and they're milking that cow till the very end, and they're making a lot of money off of it. So good for them, I guess, because it provides us fans with another another option to enjoy these athletics. And no pun intended, but the Athletics look to be the next team to be moving to Sin City and kind of embracing that atmosphere. And look, I think it's a great idea because I think the area has done a great job, especially with the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, been there a little bit longer, of embracing the league, the team, and creating a sports environment in a situation that you're getting a lot of tourists, but you also have a very large local fan base. And I think it brings together the best of both worlds. And look, I think I'm all for it. I think every sports league should have a team in there. I think the NBA is eventually going to have a team there. And you're going to talk about a city that has all four major sports, and that's not as common as you think across the country.
Yeah, I mean, look at a city like Houston doesn't have an NHL team, and Houston's the fourth or fifth biggest market in the country. Their pro sports franchises probably weren't allowed to fly over Nevada because it was, looked at as Sin City.
Yeah.
And gambling was the third rail, and no one ever wanted to talk about it.
It was all hypocritical. I mean,
it was.
They would fly over while they're flying over. You know what I mean? Personally.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because they had to get to their horse track betting and all that other crap that they use to build these damn leagues. But anyways.
The Maloofs own the Sacramento Kings, and they own casinos, and the Rooney family own tracks.
Yeah.
And,
just go back to like the big owners when the NFL first came together. They all had hands in gambling in some form or fashion, and that's how they built their empire. And it's funny that for years they turned their, well, again, like I said, they weren't getting a piece of the pie, John. As soon as they did, as soon as they were able to, they embraced it.
Come on in.
Yeah.
You look at Oakland just doesn't support the A's. The A's haven't been good for several years, but there was a point maybe 5 years ago where the A's were always in contention, right? They'd make the postseason and they just wouldn't draw. The stadium is awful. And that's the San Francisco Giants market. And the Giants have always worked against the A's, so the A's can't get a new park built there. So now they're going to move to Vegas, which makes a lot of sense. I think the other team that you have to look at, and it's a team that right now is the best record in baseball, is the Tampa Bay Rays, who just don't draw. I mean, they just don't draw. Now, you live there, so you think a ballpark maybe in Tampa rather than in St. Pete would draw 25,000, 30,000 per game? Because I can make a case that the Tampa Bay Rays are the best run franchise in all of sports when you think about it, because what's their payroll? $60 million, and they're always in contention. In a sport where, the Dodgers and Yankees can spend whatever they want. The way Tampa Bay is built is pretty remarkable, but they just don't get the support from the fans.
I would say that it could help because, again, I mean, the distance isn't a lot from downtown Tampa to where the St. Pete or where the Rays play. However, anyone who lives here understands that certainly, especially during a lot of game times, getting over the bridge becomes a massive undertaking, especially if you're coming from the east of Tampa. So if you're coming east of Tampa, say Lakeland, Orlando, that type of thing, Tampa's a decent drive to get there, but then you have to add not only a little bit more distance, but time and patience getting through traffic to get to downtown St. Pete. So it does kind of isolate them a little bit. I don't think you're all of a sudden, if you move to Tampa, all of a sudden you're going to get sellouts every night. That's not going to happen because the reality of it is this is a football town, both professionally and the state is obviously college football obsessed. So I think it would help, but I don't think it's, the key to creating sellouts or at least a very healthy attendance flow consistently throughout the season.
So if the Rays move, I think one of the natural places could be Nashville, which is a growing city, or Charlotte. But again, the Braves kind of own Charlotte a little bit, so I don't know what that would be all about. But yeah, maybe if Tampa moves, it's the Nashville. I think baseball has to expand by 2 teams to get to 32. I'm not a huge proponent of expansion. The problem is baseball, the way it's set up right now, you have 2 15-team leagues, which means you have to have interleague play every single day. You know, maybe I'm an evenist. I like, well, actually 30 is an even number as is 32, but 32 works better in sports franchises.
Even in
the NHL is 32 in terms of you can have 2 16-team leagues and you don't have to have interleague play every single day like you have in baseball. So I think that the NBA is going to expand to 32 probably within the next 5 years. One of those teams will be in Vegas, the other probably in Seattle. Yeah, if the Rays move, Nashville makes some sense. I don't like the idea of, you know, at one point didn't they float the idea of splitting it with Montreal? To me, that would be ridiculous.
That's silly. I
Yeah,
mean, if
that makes no sense.
Look, if you're going to split it, just either give them each a team or neither of them a team. It's just it's
exactly,
that's foolish to me. So no, look, I think moving the Athletics to Vegas, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you know, if you're a diehard Jose Canseco fan from back in the day and you have his Athletics jersey, well, maybe you might be a little upset. But you know, for the most part, it's the best for, I think, the league. And look, I'm a big fan of the city. Don't get me wrong. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. I enjoy going out there. I enjoy the environment. So I do think it does add something to it. And look, I think Oakland or the Athletics are going to be able to draw more casual fans because I think that's something that also attracts or is a nice addition to anyone who owns a team in that area is that the constant flow of tourists. Like I said, I mean, it's a very, very strong look at Vegas, look at obviously the Golden Knights in particular, but look at the Raiders, obviously. More specifically, the Golden Knights, because they were a franchise started from scratch. Obviously, the Raiders have a deep fan base, but the Golden Knights, huge in Las Vegas. You know, locally. I mean, again, people love the team down there. So it's like that's what you hope you're going to get from the Athletics. You're going to get that hardcore fan base, if there is one, somewhere. Maybe it's not too many people, but there is some hardcore Athletics fans out there. But also you're going to get the people that are passing through who just want to go see a baseball game and go check it out in Vegas and kind of experience the Vegas flavor in their sporting events, because the Golden Knights certainly do it. They make it feel very Vegas when you're at a Golden Knights game. So use that same mentality, bank on the additional revenue from just the passerbys, and hopefully you build a good product. So yeah, I'm all for it. And look, John, thinking about it, like again, Boston, obviously. I mean, I'm counting the Patriots in this, in terms of proximity state. You know what I mean? Like, Massachusetts, obviously being a state that has all 4 professional sports teams in the same, I don't even want to say metropolitan because it's not the same. You know what I'm saying here, John. They're called the New England Patriots, but for all intents and purposes, they are a Boston-centric team. New York, obviously, but you know, you're talking about size and different leagues. You know, that can, again, that's a little bit different. Los Angeles, again, another massive city with multiple teams in the same sport. So that's one thing. But how many cities? Philadelphia?
Yeah, Chicago, Detroit.
Yeah, Detroit.
Also, you have Arizona. I mean, they kind of split it up between Phoenix and Arizona, but they each have a
that's
team
true.
The 4 major sports. Dallas, when you put the Texas Rangers in, because they play close to Dallas. So yeah, there's probably 10, 11 cities that have a team in every single sport. The Florida Panthers play in Sunrise, which I don't know how far Sunrise is from Miami.
I mean, it's right on the outskirts. I mean, it's okay. It's Miami for all.
Yeah,
you know.
So Miami has the team. So I'd say probably 10, 12 cities that have all 4 teams. Houston's the one that sticks out because it's such a huge city.
Yeah.
And it only, doesn't have a hockey team. And San Antonio is also one of the 10 or 12 largest cities in the country, and they only have the basketball team. So, see what they do there. But Nashville's an interesting place. It's so growing. right? It's kind of the hip place to visit and live. And when you get tourists going to a city, it's nice to have that team. Like you said, now people from the visiting team will start to visit. Look at what happened last year when the Patriots played the Raiders. A ton of people from Boston, New England, flew out to Vegas, made a weekend of it. So it didn't really feel like a Patriots home game, but you could hear a lot of Patriots fans in the crowd. So that's something that does happen.
And that's the thing, exactly. If you're a fan, and by the way, Denver, that's another one.
Yeah,
Denver has quite a number. But because I was thinking, like, because Nashville is kind of like might be that you kind of, and maybe I'm just kind of not thinking of something very obvious, but Nashville, that part of the country, like you don't really have that anywhere surrounding. You know what I mean? So maybe Nashville could be like that hub and why it's becoming, such a popular place. But but no, what you were saying is a great point. When you're looking at, maybe if you're a fan of whoever, it doesn't matter, whatever baseball team, whatever football team, whatever, and you want to make a road trip or you want to go to an away game. Well, guess what? The Las Vegas Athletics, or whatever they ultimately are, I'm assuming they'll still be the Athletics, or the Las Vegas Raiders or the Las Vegas Golden Knights. That opponent, if you happen to play them in their home, that's probably going to shoot to the top of your list because you're going to be like, oh, well, we can go to Vegas, go catch a Bruins game or go catch a Red Sox game or whatever and check this out. And I think that would be pretty cool. So, yeah, I mean, like that's why I'm all for it. I think all these sports leagues should fully, and they're obviously already well on their way to doing it, fully embrace gambling and everything that it brings. And as should all the states and everything like that, because again, it's kind of like what we started the show talking about. You're free to do whatever you want. If you want to blow your money on gambling, sure. If you want to have some fun occasionally gambling, sure, you should be able to do that. And I think fully embracing it is going to allow things to move a little bit more smoothly when it comes to doing it on a day-to-day basis, managing it from a league standpoint, all that stuff. So. Yeah, I'm all for the Athletics moving there, and maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll bring in a few more fans.
Won't take much. I mean, there've been games this year where they've had like 3,000 people there.
Yeah,
it really is sad. I mean, to begin with, the stadium is horrible, and the team's horrible. So you put those two things together, you're not going to draw too many fans there.
Yeah, they don't have too many redeeming qualities, so to speak.
No.
But anyway, so I. Unfortunately, last night the Bruins fell. Very sloppy game on their behalf. Just didn't really too many mistakes. I mean, through the first couple periods, I kind of did like what they were doing, but the mistakes they were making and the sloppiness they were just too glaring, and it was too significant at the time in which they made these mistakes. And I don't know. I felt like their defense has been a little bit timid. Creating offensive opportunities. So I think that certainly hurt them. And of course, I think they really missed Patrice Bergeron yesterday. And you saw that in the faceoff dot, certainly when it comes to Barkov from Panthers and his success rate versus the Bruins and the opportunities that it created for the Panthers and not the Bruins. So look, this team just won 16 out of its last 17 games. They were due to lose a game, John. Like, was it unfortunate sloppily yesterday and kind of missed an opportunity to steal one? Yeah, sure. But at the end of the day, I'm not too concerned about this team that just won 65 games like some Bruins fans are kind of, panicking a little bit and whatever. And I'm like, look, this team was bound to lose a game. They won 9 in a row. They're not going to go. I mean, as much as it would have been nice to make 16-0 great again, like I said, they weren't going to go 16-0 in the playoffs. So lose a game, you regroup. There's no better team in the league than that in regrouping after a loss, certainly a tough loss. Like I'll look forward to seeing what they can do on the road in Sunrise in just a few days, tomorrow actually. But in reality, I think this team is fine, and they'll be better on tomorrow night.
The alarming thing is the way they've always controlled the third period. Well, that wasn't the case last night. It was 2-2 going into the third period, and Florida scores 4 goals, one being an empty netter. But still, normally the Bruins control the third period. If you're even going into the third, you feel pretty good that the Bruins are going to win. But look, Florida had to play really good hockey down the stretch just to qualify. So they were playing in these playoff type games the last couple of weeks. The Bruins remain competitive and were playing great hockey. And, this is what can happen. My big question for you is, do you go back to Ullmark in game 3? And the only reason I would say is he's not played 3 consecutive games for the Bruins since December. So it's been sort of a platoon since. Do you go with Ullmark or do you go with Swayman in game 3?
Yeah, you got to stick with Ullmark. And I said this before the playoffs. Like once you get to the postseason, you can't. You just got to kind of ride your guy, and it doesn't mean that Swayman might not get a game at some point, but you gotta. I don't know. Maybe I'm just more a traditionalist when it comes to. I think you need to ride your guy, and I think Ullmark was pretty good last night. I think he would have liked to had a couple of the. I mean, again, I can't blame because some of those situations it was just awful defense on behalf of the Bruins and just kind of leaving him out to dry. But I'm sure he would have liked to have a couple of those back. And if you would have asked him, he would have probably said I don't, no doubt about it. I mean, the guy won 40 games. He had the best save percentage in all of hockey. He had the best goals against average in all of hockey. You go back to him and you ride him. I mean, I feel like it's going to take a lot for him to not start a game at some point in this playoff run. And if you are not starting him, then I think the Bruins are nothing to do with Jeremy Swayman because he's a perfectly fine. It's just you ride your guy. You ride the guy who was really the backbone of your goaltending.
Yeah, remember in 2011, the Bruins lost the first 2 games in round 1 to Montreal, and Tim Thomas was getting booed, and everyone was ready to pull him, and yada, yada, yada. And they won the cup. So, yeah, I mean, I don't have to tell you, you're ups and downs there. There could be an off night, and then you bounce back, and you got everything covered, and this guy's been sensational all year. I think it has the defense played last night. Like you said, just a sloppy effort by the Bruins.
Yeah, and look, I mean, again, this is a team that, again, ending 8 in a row, won their first playoff game, which gave them a 9-game winning streak. And that was, again, I believe it was their 15th win in their last 16 games. So, eventually, John, you're going to have an off night. And I think that's what we saw here. And it didn't help that Patrice Bergeron wasn't available. And again, I mean, the reality of it was they were still in it going into the third period. So despite all the struggles and kind of sloppy play, they're never completely out of it. Obviously, it got a little out of control at the end, but I'm not, this wasn't a team that was dominated from start to finish. I mean, I don't think I've seen that happen at any point during the season. So at the end of the day, it's disappointing. You would have liked to see them go into Florida up 2-0. Sloppy game in game 3, but the reality of it is this team's going to be perfectly fine. And so speaking of goalie changes, though, Minnesota decided to make a goalie change and put in Marc-Andre Fleury, and he was not good yesterday. They lost 7-3, a little bit worse than the Bruins loss, but this was just a poor performance from the multi-time Stanley Cup champion. And again, I mean, this is the delicate nature of trying to manage goaltending, certainly in the postseason. Now, the Bruins have the advantage in that sense, in that they have 2 excellent goaltenders. The Wild have 2 pretty good goaltenders most nights. The problem with Marc-Andre Fleury is he's had a recent stretch of very poor playoff performances, and I think that's an issue that should have been taken into account, and certainly I don't think was given a lot of thought heading into last night in Minnesota, and that paid the price against that. We talk about Dallas and having a hockey team. Well, that Dallas Stars team really took it to the Wild last night.
Yeah, we've seen some high-scoring games, right? Dallas had 7 last night. Tampa had 7 against Toronto the night before. Last night, Florida gets 6, one of them being empty. Now, I think what happens, too, is you get down a couple goals in the regular season, maybe it's a different vibe. When you get down a couple of goals in the postseason, now you really push it. If you push it too far, now you leave yourself susceptible on the back end. and next thing you know, a 2-goal lead turns into a 4-goal lead. Almost feels like the old Super Bowls where, teams would get blown out in the fourth quarter because, you got nothing else to do but try to hit some Hail Marys and so forth. Fleury's always been kind of a streaky goalie anyway, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, but for the most part, he's been very, very good in the postseason. Certainly, Pittsburgh days and that first season with the Golden Knights. But as of late, though, obviously he's older. He's not as as in his peak like he once was. And it's look, Minnesota's I don't think the expectations for the Wild are too high, but huge wrinkle in their plan and trying to make a long playoff run because bad goaltending just as much as a great goaltending performance can steal a game, a bad goaltending performance can give one away, and I think that's part of what we saw yesterday. Whereas I think Ullmark was better in the Bruins loss. I just think the Bruins just played too poorly in front of them. I mean, there were some really bad giveaways. A couple led directly to goals, and it just didn't really work out too well in the Bruins' favor. But it happens. We had also the Oilers. That's who it was. I was trying to think for a second. I lost it. It was on the tip of my tongue. The Oilers tied things up. Something that you kind of expected. It would be surprising if they fell down 0-2. But look, I mean, this is a great time of the year because we get both the NBA playoffs and the Stanley Cup playoffs every night. Every night is 2 TVs going. Usually one of each sport, sometimes both of each sport. It all kind of depends. And thankfully, John, the Bruins and the Celtics pretty much play on alternate nights, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the leagues could get together and take care of that, right? Because it would help ratings for those 2 leagues. Obviously, if the Celtics have a standalone game, it will help the national ratings. So sometimes the arenas aren't available, so you play on the same night and you go from there. But just really interesting with that Edmonton win because they're now even 1 game apiece, and Connor McDavid, the best player in the world, has not scored a point in either game. Yeah. So that's probably a good sign for Edmonton because he's going to start scoring. And to win at least one of the 2 games without him scoring shows that team's a little deeper than maybe most people think.
Yeah, and look, I mean, obviously, like he's a guy that's got you're not going to keep him quiet for long, and you got if you're the opposing team, you got to take advantage of those quiet nights, and unfortunately, they weren't able to take advantage of both. So, all right. Anyways, before we go, I do want to spend a couple minutes though on Aaron Rodgers because has your expectation that he gets traded to the Jets, has that percentage changed at all over the last week? Has it gone down? Has it gone up? Has it stayed the same?
I think it's gone down a little bit only because we're now a week away from the draft, and you would think the Packers want to get this thing done before the draft so they can get some draft capital for this year's draft. Why would they want to trade a draft and get draft capital for next year's draft? Yeah. You're wasting a year. So you would think maybe the 2 sides are just going to get together and say, let's get this thing done. A second in this year's draft, a conditional second next year. I think that should get it done. I know the Packers want a number 1 pick somewhere along the way. The Jets don't want to give up this year's number 1 pick because it's 13th overall. You don't want to give up that draft capital because you can add another stud. And if you add Rodgers, now you've got yourself a playoff contender. But I think it's gone down a little bit because it's just been quiet.
Yeah.
Like nothing happening here. I mean, Jalen Hurts out of nowhere signs a 5-year, $255 million extension. OBJ signs with Baltimore when everybody expected him to sign with the Jets. Maybe he knows something that we don't know about what the situation is with Aaron Rodgers and Jets, although I think OBJ just went where the money was. And I don't blame him. If they're going to offer you $15 million guaranteed, I couldn't care less who my quarterback is. I want the money. So, I think it's gone down a little bit, but I think the clock is ticking, and you want to get this thing done before the draft because of that, because then you just, now if it doesn't happen before the draft, then there's really no deadline to worry about. You could wait till July and do this thing because that draft pick would not be till next April. And that wouldn't be a good situation for the Jets. So I think the both sides just have to sit down and get this thing hammered out.
It's like one big game of chicken. Like
who's going
to blink first? And I feel like I'm with you. I don't, the percentage has drastically changed, but I do have more doubts than I did certainly a few weeks ago. Whether or not I don't know how impactful there were some reports that Aaron Rodgers' comments prior or on his appearance on the Pat McAfee show about being 90% 90% retired. I don't know how impactful those were and Woody Johnson's view of this whole thing. And that was one of the reports that came out as to why this might have not been done yet because of that. And look, there is risk involved in getting Aaron Rodgers. I mean, are you getting him for a year? Are you getting him for 2 years? I mean, I think that's a big difference, certainly when it comes to compensation and what you're willing to give up. Because, if you're going to get Aaron Rodgers for 2 years, maybe you're okay giving up that first round draft pick. So, I mean, again, and Joel says, maybe he wants to do it during the draft for publicity. Look, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like that's not a possibility. I think it certainly is. I mean, he's the type of guy who, kind of likes the limelight a little bit. He likes the discussion being centered around him. But look, I mean, if the Jets can't get this done, they're the ones who lose the most out of all this, are the Jets. The Packers, they've moved on. Aaron Rodgers is not going to be their starting quarterback next year. So whether he's traded or not, the only negative impact is financial. That's it. As far as they're concerned, Jordan Love is their quarterback going into 2023. The Jets, however, would have to, well, as Kyle so appropriately says, they can't go back to Zach Wilson, but they might not have a choice. Like who?
Yeah, because who else is there, right? I mean, unless they get in on Lamar Jackson, but that doesn't appear to be an option. So, yeah, I mean, all of a sudden, how does Zach Wilson feel at that point? I mean, he's obviously playing with less confidence than you'd like to see from a third-year player. It was all Aaron Rodgers, and then that was just kind of a joke. We just wanted publicity. We've always been behind you. The Jets have to make this deal. They've been irrelevant forever.
Yeah.
So they get an opportunity to get an all-time great quarterback. Like, I don't know how he's going to play. I assume he'll be really good with the Jets because he does have that type of mentality when, doubted or pushed that, he can step up and play at a high level. They need to do this because that's all we've heard about for now. A month and a half, Ian. It's been going on for a long time. I mean, we saw Pat McAfee in early March. So, here we are. It's beyond tax day. And he's still a member of the Packers. They don't want him. The Jets do want him. And, what's the hang-up? The difference is when Brady went to Tampa, there was no compensation involved. So if you got Brady for 1 or 2 years, it was obviously well worth it. You won a Super Bowl in the first year. You didn't have to give the Patriots anything. With this situation, there's going to be draft compensation.
And again, I mean, that's a huge deal because, I mean, you're not going to give up, a boatload of draft capital, certainly not a first-round pick for Aaron Rodgers for one season. And as good as that,
I wouldn't even do that. Yeah, the NBA is different. The NBA, you think at the trade deadline, if you had Kevin Durant and he has 1 year left on the contract, and you're going to go all in, then you go ahead and do it. Because first-round picks in the NBA don't mean as much as they do in the NFL.
Well, and look, I mean, and Kevin Durant, I mean, you're not really worried that he's going to retire after that year,
right?
And leave you high and dry. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, I mean, he said it, 90% retired, and I don't know how legit that number is. I put faith in that. That's his mindset. And look, there's a very real possibility that he will retire. And John, there's also a risk that what we saw last year was a physical drop-off. Mm-hmm. So you're not getting 2011 Aaron Rodgers. You're not getting back-to-back MVP Aaron Rodgers. You're getting a guy that's still a very good quarterback and certainly will elevate this team. But we're not 100% certain what he ultimately is going to be in 2023. And if he gets to camp late, if he gets, joins this team late, there's a lot of catching up on top of learning that he's going to have to do. And that I think is going to be a little bit too much to handle on top of, playing for a new team, which isn't as easy as some have made it out to be.
It took him 10 or 11 weeks to really get a vibe with his young receivers last year in Green Bay because, again, he wasn't totally committed. He shows up to training camp. He doesn't go to the OTAs. He doesn't work in the offseason with those young receivers. If that happens again, the Jets might be a 500 team and then they catch fire a little bit late, but is that good enough? That maybe puts you in third place and you have to go on the road to win a wild card game, and then you're playing at Kansas City in the divisional round, and that's a difficult road to travel. So yeah, I mean that's why the Jets, I think, are just going to have to bite the bullet and do this, because they've got their fan base excited about this, and now it's just waiting on hold. It's like you want to buy this beautiful closing date, but all of a sudden you got problems with the front porch, and that delays the closing date, and then you get another closing date. Heating system doesn't work, so you got to fix that before you have a closing date. So it's very complicated to screw things up, and Aaron Rodgers does make things complicated. I mean, this is not an easy guy to deal with.
I mean, there really are a match made in heaven, and certainly will lead to some great drama throughout the season. So I want from that standpoint. But again, we'll see what happens, and part of this may just be the fact that, hey, like you said, the draft's a week away, so there's some anxiety starting to build, because it hasn't happened yet, and time is running out to figure that all out. So, but hopefully it happens while we're on the air one of these days, and we can have some breaking news and do all that. So, we'll see. I'll try to get in contact with Aaron. Maybe you'll have a better chance.
I will. I'll work on it.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you had that the restraining order still intact, and you can't contact him anymore under your real name. So we'll see about that. But anyways,
I'm like Robert De Niro in the movie The Fan.
Yeah, there you go. Wasn't that movie made about you somehow in the past?
Well,
looking into the
future?
future?
About that, because it was Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Wesley Snipes was playing a Barry Bonds character, and the way I talked about Barry Bonds back then, people were like, "Are you the fan?" I go, "No, De Niro is my favorite actor, so I guess there's a connection there." Well,
I mean, I suppose it's I mean, that's not a terrible movie to be confused with, possibly being I guess based on. It's much better, I would say, than Falling Down with Michael Douglas.
This one's a little bit different. That was rough. That was certainly rough. Good movie, but
I love that
Michael
movie.
Douglas was
who's
damn
fantastic.
good in that, wasn't he?
But
and Robert Duvall, obviously, is the retiring police officer. Yeah, good stuff.
But yes, we're gonna say goodbye. We'll be back tomorrow, though, and like I said, hopefully, maybe we'll get a little bit more action. Maybe we'll get a little bit more information on this Aaron Rodgers thing. Maybe they'll hear how anxious we are to get more information and move this thing along. If not, we'll talk some more NBA and Stanley Cup playoffs and whatever the hell else crosses our mind. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great day. Have a great holiday if you celebrate today and all that fun stuff. So we'll talk to you soon.